Hi, everyone. This is Dr. J here, and I have another episode here for you today. The topic of this video is you are not doomed by your genes. And the reason that this topic holds dear and close to my heart is because as a physician, I will often hear patients say, oh, my aunt has diabetes, or my uncle or my mom has high blood pressure, so that means that I'm going to get it too. And there's almost like a frenzy. There's anxiety, there's nervousness that I witness all at the same time when I hear those words coming out of a person's mouth. They utter the words, but then when I look at them and see them, what I really notice, if I get to the depth, is nervousness, anxiety, and placing another person's history on themselves. And also what I notice is just that person already placing themselves in a position of imprisonment, that because this happened in my history, in my family history, that means I'm doomed to get it too. And I'm here to tell you that you are not doomed by your genes. Yes, our genetics do play a part in the diseases that come into our bodies. However, you are not doomed by them. And this brings me to the topic of epigenetics. And epigenetics is the study of how our behavior and environment can influence our genes. So even if we backtrack and just talk about just a brief science lesson of our genes, we have a molecule in every human cell called a DNA. It stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And what happens is DNA can convert into something called RNA. So I like to liken this to, back in the day when you had those typewriters, and there's a typewriter that you're typing on. And as you're typing on the typewriter, you're noticing, words come up on the page, and then out comes the paper that spits out. Well, that paper that spits out is RNA. And RNA is creating its message is copying a message based on what it reads on DNA. And then RNA then becomes a protein, or I should even backtrack, an amino acid. And an amino acid are the building blocks of your proteins. So that is the process of gene expression. It first starts off at DNA, then goes to RNA, then it's expressed in the form of a protein. And there are different processes that can occur that affect the way that our genes are expressed. For example, there's a process called methylation, and it is a chemical group that attaches onto the DNA and therefore has the ability to activate or repress certain genes. That means certain genes can be turned on and off based on this methyl group that attaches onto the DNA molecule. So that affects the way that RNA is produced, and therefore affects the way that the amino acids then get produced, and then affects the way that our proteins get produced in our body. And you know that I love talking about chronic diseases, but more so I love talking about it because there needs to be a shift in the way that we think about chronic diseases. Is this something that is so prevalent in our community? And one of the chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, that is the leading chronic disease that is most prevalent in our world. And not only that, it is the leading chronic disease that leads to death. And in cardiovascular disease, there's a process called atherosclerosis. And what happens in that process is that there is the lining of your blood vessel, that becomes disrupted. And when the lining of your blood vessels becomes disrupted, it precipitates an inflammatory response. And with this inflammatory response becoming increasingly more and more, you start to build plaques in the lining of your blood vessels. And what happens is that with more inflammation, the plaques, they can break off and clog up your blood vessel, and that's what leads to heart attacks. So the reason why I'm speaking about this is because, number one, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in not only the United States, but in the world. And there are so many risk factors that lead to cardiovascular disease, being hypertension, diabetes, for example. And some people think that, okay, just because this runs in my family, I have to get it too. And even though that is, there's a trueness that is there, given that we have a hereditary component to diseases that get expressed throughout our family line, but we have an opportunity to do something about it. We have a choice to do something about it. We can adopt and dismantle certain behaviors that don't set us up for success with our health and our fitness. And I think the number one thing that we must focus on in order to change those behaviors so that we can then influence our genetic expression is the way that we think. Because telling yourself that you're doomed by your genes, telling yourself that because this happened to my aunt, to my sister, to my mother, to my father, I'm going to get it too, does not set you up for a life that is, vibrant, that is full of joy, that is filled with endless possibilities. Because that is what you ultimately get when you have a life that is healthy and fit. That is the outcome. So I just want to emphasize that it's important to examine the thoughts that we tell ourselves on a daily basis, because that influences the way that our genes are expressed and influences the diseases that we can affect us from not inheriting. So, which brings me to my next point, because then our thoughts, not only is it important to be aware of your thoughts, but your thoughts then impact your behaviors. You have a thought, but then once you have that thought, you think about, well, what do you then want to do? What new behavior do you want to adopt, or what old behavior do you want to do away with, so that you can lead to a life that is healthy and fit, so that you can lead to a life that is full of joy and endless possibilities? Because we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of our lives. Yes, we have our past. We can use our past to as learning experiences, as a springboard of how we want our lives to truly pan out. But ultimately, it is in our hands. It is in our hands to change the trajectory of our lives. And our genes don't have to hold us captive. So, yeah, I got really into it because I think this is just so important for us to examine our thoughts and realize that our thoughts can impact our behaviors, and that we ultimately have a choice of how we want our lives to live. that's not abandoning that our genes don't play a part, but we have a choice. We have a part of how our genes can be expressed, and therefore we can affect how chronic diseases get inherited. So if anything that I say resonates with you, I like you to also follow me at my Instagram channel so you can also just keep abreast of what I'm just doing and information that I'm providing to the community. You can follow me at medfitdo, that's MEDFITDO. And I also work as a health and fitness coach. So if any of you, if you're a busy professional woman who has family history of chronic diseases, who is under the notion that I am doomed by my genes. I am doomed from what my mother has, my father has, my aunt has, my uncle has, my grandmother has, my grandfather has. I would like to let you know that let's dismantle that. Let's dismantle that. And let's not only dismantle that, but let's learn how to dismantle that, because there are, different processes that needs to take place, different thought processes that needs to take place in order for you to develop a new thought for yourself, that you are actually in the driver's seat. You are not doomed by anything. You are not doomed by anything. So if that is you, I will also like you to schedule a discovery session with me, a 30-minute discovery session with me let's go through those processes. Let's go through those thought processes that has led you to the thought that you are doomed by your genes. Let's learn how to dismantle those thoughts so that you can live a life that is full of joy, so that you can live a life that is full of abundance, so that you can live a life that is full of endless possibilities for yourself. Because that is what happens when you learn to really take control of your health and of your fitness. So thank you so much for listening today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can keep abreast of all the things that I'm talking about, and let me know of how I can better serve you. Let me know if there's any information that you'd like me to elaborate on, and I'm happy to do that. So thank you so much for listening and have a blessed day. I'm out. Bye.